Hi, I wanted to give a quick run through of the Applia assignment 4.5. I'm going to probably start doing these for each of them, but this is the first one. I think that we're finally getting to a point where these may be some concepts that maybe need a little further explanation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you my screen here. And this is, kind of the class page. And what I'm going to do is, if you come in here, I'm going to go to Applia 4.5. And I'm going to just sort of start working this, and we'll kind of go along. Now, what it does up here at the top is it talks about how this works. This is the traditional or the Aristotelian square of opposition. And what it's doing is it's trying to point to you, and the first few parts, 4.1, 4.2, 4.3, are basically trying to test you on some very basic concepts. The concept of contraries, subcontraries, contradictions, and subcontradictories, and subalterations. Now, what happens is an A statement is like all A are B, and an E statement is all A are, or no A are E. And so what happens is if you say something like, let's say all the students in this class are male. Okay, that's clearly a false A statement. The opposite of that would be no students in this class are male. That's an E statement. That's also false. And so the idea is you can have both of those statements, A and E, be false. But you can't have a statement where A and E are both true if they're talking about the same set or categories of things. So if I say like all mammals are animals that give birth to their live via live birth, and then I say no mammals are creatures that give birth live, then, or all birds are animals that lay eggs versus no birds are animals that lay eggs. Those are talking about contraries. So the idea there is if one of them is true, the other one must be false. They can both be false, but they both can't be true. You can't be all animals laying eggs and no animals laying eggs. You can't have all mammals giving birth live and no mammals giving birth live. Now, subcontrary is where you're talking about specific examples within categories. And in this case, they can both be true, but they can't both be false in the Aristotelian view. Why can they not be false? Because if you say some things are a certain way and some things are not a certain way, it's quite possible that some aren't a certain way, and there's possibly certain that some are. Like I could say some people in this class are male, or some people in this class are wearing hats, or some people in this class are taking it online. Then in this case, all of them are. And I could say some students in this class are not wearing hats. Some students in this class are not male or female, whatever category I decide to use. And so you can have some where there's some that, some that are and some that are not, that both are true. But if we make what's called the existential assumption, which we do in Aristotelian logic, is that whenever you make a categorical statement, something does exist about it. So if I say some, people in this class are wearing hats, and some people, and I say, no, that's false, then I would have to say some people in this class are not wearing hats, and I say, no, that's false. Well, that doesn't make any sense, because how can it not be true that some are wearing hats, and how can it be not true that some are not wearing hats? Like, it just doesn't make sense. If there exists some people in the class, then somebody has to have that predicate applied to it. So they can both be true, but they both can't be false. So if one's false, the other has to be true. Now, if one's true, you really can't say anything, because the other one could be true, it could be false. You don't know for sure, but at least if one's true, one's false. Now, contradictory, that goes across the triangle. That's this arrow that goes kind of back and forth across it. And the idea here is if you have a statement like all A are B, and so, basically I'm saying like all dogs are canines. You can't then say there are some dogs that are not canines. And O is a some are not statement. So you have to take the same subject, the same predicate. Instead of saying all are, you say some are not. So the case here is if it's true that all dogs are canines, then it's false that some are not. And if it's true that some are not, then it's false that all are, because there exists some that aren't. So it's clearly not the case that all are. E and I, same thing. If I say no, no dogs are felines, then that's true. Then I would say some dogs are felines has to be false. And if it says, say, some dogs are canines, and that's true, then you can't go around saying no dogs are canines, because there exists some that are not. Some, so that basically means, so whatever the truth value of A is, O is going to be the opposite. Whatever the truth value of E is, I is going to be the opposite. And then finally, you have the idea of subalteration. And subalteration is the idea that if A is true, I is true. And if E is true, O is true. Why? Because we make an existential assumption. We assume that if you make a claim like all A or B, that whatever A is does in fact exist. And so if I say, all dogs are canines, sorry, I should just use the example I'm used to, then we know we can follow down to some dogs are canines, because we know in the Aristotelian view that when you make a claim in the A statement, that we assume that there do exist some members of that category. And so the same thing's true. If I say no dogs are felines, we can then say some dogs are not felines. We know that there exist some dogs that are not felines because no dogs are felines. So we know that there exists some and they aren't, because basically when you say some are, you're making an existential claim. You're claiming something exists. Now, the idea there, though, is if I say, like some dogs are canines, therefore all dogs are canines. Well, that's making a pretty big leap, because I could say some people in this class are wearing hats, therefore all people in this class are wearing hats. That just doesn't follow. You can have some people in the class that are wearing hats, and that doesn't mean everybody in the class is wearing a hat. And you have some people who are not wearing hats. That doesn't mean nobody in that class is wearing hats. You can't go to a random. So you can't go from true down here to false up here. But if I know it's false that some people in the class, it's false that some are not wearing hats, then I know it's false that no people in the class are wearing hats. Why? Because if it's false that some are not, then we know that some are, and therefore we know that the fact is that no people are wearing hats has to be true. We could also work it kind of like this. If I say some are not, then we know from a sub-contrary that at least one of them has to be true. We know this one we know that if O is false, then I has to be true. And if I is true, E has to be false. So if this one's false, makes that one true, which makes E false. Or you can just go, if O is false, E is false. If I is false, A is false. But I being true doesn't make A true, and O being true doesn't make E true. It's only the case that if you say, some are not this way, that's false. If I say, some people in this class are not wearing hats, and then you go, no, that's not true, that's false. Then I know that there are some people who are wearing hats, because you just said it's false. I actually know nobody in the class is probably wearing a hat. Some are not wearing hats is false. So we know that some people are not wearing hats. We know that's false. That means everybody in the class that is there has to be wearing a hat, or has to be wearing a hat. So therefore, when I say nobody in the class is wearing a hat, well, we know some are, therefore we know that's false. Hopefully that kind of follows and makes sense. The easy thing is you can kind of follow it if you think about what you're saying, you give some examples, but the other way you can do this is you can purely just look at this chart and you can say, okay, E is true, so what can I say? Well, I know if E is true, then I know I is false, I know O is false, and I know that these two are contrary, so E being true means A is false. So I know that if E is true, O is true, A and I are false. Okay, I know that if O is false, I know that E is false, and I know that A and I are true. Why? Because they can't both be false, and these two are contraries. But if O is true, well, then I know nothing about E, and I don't know anything about I, but I do know A is false, because if there are some that are not, then it's not the case that all are. Okay? So you can kind of think it through, or you can also just look at this and go, okay, this is false, therefore that's false. This is true. Oh, true doesn't go up, but I know these both, because they're subcontraries, they can both be true, but they both can't be false. So those are kinds of rules. If you just kind of know what all those relationships are, you can do it that way just by learning the rules or the relationships, or you can do it via actually thinking through the process. Now, you come down here and it gives you some examples. And all this first one is asking you to do is to look at the idea of the contradictory relationship. The contradictory is always going to be going across the square. So any statement it says, if it says some baseball coaches are soccer moms, we know that it's taking that, which is an I statement, which means the contradictory relationship is going to talk about an E. So some are blank, that's an I statement. We're going to talk about E statements. And we know that whenever it's true, the other one's going to be false. So we just know that whatever it's saying in this one, if it says false, it means true. Why? Because we're looking at the contradictory. And then we're just looking at what's on the opposite side. So this is an I statement. So we're going to go from I up to E. And an E statement would read, no baseball coaches are soccer moms. And in this case, some baseball coaches are not soccer moms. That's an O statement. So we're going to go up to an A because it goes across. It's false, so it's going to make that true. And the A statement is all baseball coaches are soccer moms. Easy enough. Now, in this case, you would have to do them and it would check them. I believe because I'm the instructor, it's putting the little check mark as soon as I do it. That way, I know what the answer is that they have. Now, we can do that. And then we can go on to the next one. The next 4.2 is not asking you anything more than to think about the contrary relationship. The contrary relationship is between A and E. A says all A or B. E says no A or E. And we know that both of these cannot be true. We know that they can both be false. We know one of them can be true and one can be false, but we don't know anything else. So what happens in this case is basically if you have an all blank or non-L, all J or non-L, the only thing we're comparing it to, because we're looking just specifically at the contrary relationship, we have to look at the E statement. So we're going to look at the no E. Same thing, all. So we're going to go to the no statement. If we have a no statement, we're going to go to the all statement. Very simple, right? Now, what we're going to do is we say, okay, well, this one's false. Well, we know they can both be false, but we don't know, but they both can't be true. So in this case, if one's false, we really can't determine what the other one is. It's logically undetermined. They can both be false. Now, if on the other hand, one of them is true, then we know the other one is false. And that's fairly easy. If it's false, we can't draw any conclusion, so it's logically undetermined. And it's fairly simple and straightforward how that works. The next 4.3, or number 3, is asking you just to look at this subcontrary relationship. The subcontrary relationship says they both can't be false, but they both can be true. One can be true, one can be false. So anytime you get a statement like some P or non-P, you know you're going to go with some P or not non-P because you've got an I statement. So you're going to now look at the O statement. And so if you have, once again, an I statement, some non-B or P, so you're going to look at the some non-B or not P. And if you have a some non-B or not P, you're going to look back at the I statement, which is some non-B R. You take out the word not. Now what you know is they both can't be true, they both can't be false, but they both could be true. So if one's false, we know the other one's true. So for example, this one's false, we know that one's true. But in this case, if one's true, we really don't know anything about the other one. You can have some people who are and some people who aren't. Like in this class, we have some people who are students who are male. We have some people who are students who are wearing hats. We have some people who are students who are working in the break room at their job. or at their desk at their job. Those are all things. And some people who are not doing any of those things. And so that's logically undetermined if the one is true. Now, we move along to number 4. And this one is only looking at the subalteration relationship. The subalteration relationship is basically saying that truth goes down, falsity goes up. Truth goes down, falsity goes up. If you have a statement like no dogs are felines, you know there are some dogs that are not felines, because you know there exists a dog, there exists a member of that class, therefore there has to be something that is not that, because you know none are that. But then on the other hand, the subalteration says if it's false that some of them are not that, then you know you can't make a claim about the whole class, because some of them aren't that, some of them are the other thing, and therefore you can't make a claim that none of them are that. Now, in this case, we're looking specifically up on those sides, so A and I, E and O. So if you have an A or I statement, so in this case this is an I statement, then we're going to go up to an A statement. And we know truth goes down, but falsity goes up. So we don't actually know anything from that, because truth can go down, it can't go up. And we know an I statement is below an A statement. All non-BRP, that's true. We're going to go down to an I statement, so some non-P are P. We know truth goes down, so we know we can logically conclude that that's a true statement. And we can go from like non-B goes up, falsity goes up, truth goes down, so you can figure that out on your own. I'm going to do one more of these. 4.5, practice it. So what you're going to do is it's going to say, we're given the E statement and we're given the value of true. So we know E is true. So we know this is true. So we're going to go over to A, and we know that if it's true, we know the other one has to be false. They both can't be true. We know if this one's true, we know I has to be false because they're contradictory, and we know truth goes down. So we know if E is true, O is true. So we can just go down and say, okay, that's the A statement. So we know that if that one's true, this one's false. Some are justifiable. We know that those are contradictory, so we know that one's false. And we know truth goes down in the subalteration, so that's true. And that's how you do all those, is you just kind of follow the thing. Some of them won't be determinable, because, for example, falsity doesn't go down. So when you go from all an A statement down to the I statement, which is this one here, we know that we can't really determine what it is, because the truth goes down, but the falsity does not. There could be some that are and some that aren't. Just if A is false, it doesn't mean that there aren't some people who are. If it's false that all of you are going to pass, probably shouldn't use that as an example. That doesn't mean that some of you are going to pass is false. If it's false that all of you are going to pass, it doesn't make it false that some of you are going to pass is false. So it's logically undetermined. So what happens here is we then get into a little bit of this idea of illicit, contrary, and a few other things. I'm going to stop this. I'm sorry, I'm not sure what I was doing. I took off my video for a second. So what happens here is I was meaning to take this off so I could just look at this real quick. Because I don't know how long. I'm going to stop this and I'll go through 4.6, or number 6 through 10 separately. That way the video isn't as long.